Hello everyone, this is Will Whitfield with W3 Productions. Today I wanted to share a rigid body simulation tutorial with you in Blender 2.8. You might have seen a previous video I did with, it's about 9 seconds long, with a bunch of cubes stacked upon each other, and a wrecking ball comes down and knocks them over. As they're falling down, they actually turn to spheres and roll around on the ground. That was about a couple of years ago, and I can't even remember how I did it, but I wanted to explore that today in a new version of Blender and maybe have a little bit more fun with it than I did back then. So to start, I'm in Blender 2.8, the beta, and I've already saved the name of my file just to get that out the way. And this is the beginning scene that you start with a cube, the light, and the camera. I'm actually going to delete the light and the camera right now. I'll hold Shift while I select each one of these and hit X to delete. I believe I went ahead and on options and preferences I set it to my mouse to be the way it was in Blender 2.7, just old habit. So my left click actually selects, and my right click selects, my left click does the context or move the mouse. So old habits died hard, but you should probably learn how to do it the right way. But just bear with me on that, just getting rid of old habits. The first thing we want to do is set up our collections correctly. So we have a collection of objects, kind of like layers in Blender 2.7, but a little bit different. But I want to make a separate one for the cube tower, and then another one for the chain and wrecking ball. So I'm going to rename the initial collection by double clicking on it and calling it cube, or maybe cubes. Hit enter. I'm going to right click in the outliner and click new. Double click to rename that one wrecking ball. And I'm going to make one more and call that else. So now I'm going to use this default cube to make the cube that I want to use. So first, I notice I left click somewhere and I moved the 3D cursor out of the origin. So we'll be moving it a couple of times in our tutorial. So just to know, if you want to move it back to the origin of the world, just hit Shift S and you'll get a pie menu. And I'm going to click on Cursor to World Origin. Also, it'll be helpful to have the Node Wrangler add-on. To do that, or enable it, go to Edit, Preferences, make sure you're on the Add-ons tab, and type in Search Node Wrangler and check it. And I usually hit Save Preferences. So for a cube, first thing I want to do is put it kind of on the floor of the world, put it above the X and Y plane. So I'm going to hit G, Z, and then 1, and now the bottom of it is level with the floor of the world, so to speak. Then with it still selected, I'm going to go to Object and then go down to Shade Smooth. Now currently we're in the default layout, and we're going to go to the modeling layout, which puts us in edit mode. We're going to need a little bit more geometry or vertices for our cube, for all the cubes to work well with physics. So I'm going to hit W with all the vertices selected and hit subdivide. And it gave it a 1 subdivision, but we want more. So I'm going to hit this arrow at the bottom left with this next to subdivide, this context menu, and going to click on number of cuts and enter 4. Now if I was to make any other action, these context menus, whether you're adding an object or doing any other special command, if you do anything else, it will go away forever until you do another action. So you want to go ahead and make those changes here before you commit to any other action. With that being done, I want to bevel the edges to make them look nicer. It's not a necessity, but it's my preference. So I'm going to go up here to the top left and in edit mode. And right now we have vertices select. We want to go to edge select. And now that all the dots gone away, we're just selecting edges. So I'm going to hit Alt A to deselect everything. I'm going to hold down Alt and select, well, for me is right click, to select that edge. Now I want to select every edge on this cube, so I'm going to hold Alt and Shift so I can select many edges. And I'm just using my middle mouse wheel to rotate. You can also do that up here. You can use this to zoom in and out. Use this one to pan. But I'm still used to using the mouse to do so, so it works either way. All edges are selected, so I want to bevel them, so I'm going to hit Control and B. Now you see this little line coming from the mouse to the origin of the box or the cube, and I'm going to move away slightly, and so I get a nice bevel. I believe that should be good. Now we have another context menu, and I want to change the number of segments to 4, so we have a little bit more geometry with our bevel. And that's all we should need. So I'm going to go back to the layout mode. And we have a nice little cube or box. The next thing we want to do with our cube is create a shape key. Now with our shape key, we're going to have the ability to turn this into a sphere. So to do that, we're going to make the basis or starting shape key by going to the object data tab and go into shape key section and click on the plus sign. That creates our basis, or basically what the shape of the cube is now. And now we're going to add another one. I'm going to call it sphere. Now with sphere still selected, I'm going to go back to modeling, which puts us in edit mode by default. I'm going to hit A to select all edges and vertices. I'm actually going to vertices select. And then I'm going to go to mesh, transform to sphere. Now as I move my mouse away from the origin, it did as best as it could to make my object into a mesh shape or a sphere shape. I'm going to click my mouse to get out of that mode, and actually give you a context menu where you could actually numerically affect that. We're going to leave it all the way to 1 because we want to get close as we can to a sphere. It's not perfect, but it should suit our purposes well. So going out back to layout mode, we are dumped back into the object data tab, and if you go to sphere and you change this value by clicking and dragging it, you can see we can go between the cube and the sphere. And we're going to actually animate that. There's no secret to using physics to change this into a sphere. We're just going to animate it at the time that the wrecking ball impacts our tower. So I'm going to guess for right now, and we're going to change it later. Guess when it's going to happen, even though we haven't animated it yet. So I'm going to say about frame 70 is going to be the moment of impact. So at that moment, up to that moment, we want it to be a cube. So we're going to, at 0, we're going to insert a keyframe. So I'm going to hover over the value of 0 and hit the I key to insert a keyframe, and you see it turn yellow. And I'm going to give it about a second. By default, I'm in the Eevee render engine. And if I go here, you can see it's 24 frames per second. I'm going to leave it at that value, but I'm going to go 30 frames up, a little over a second. Go back to the Object Data tab and change that value to a 1. And now I'm going to hit I again to put another keyframe. So now we have 2 keyframes on the timeline. We scrubbed before, it's still a cube. And now in between there, it's changing into a sphere till we get to frame 100 and it's totally a sphere. So now we have the shape and the transformation of the cube complete. Now we want to work on the physics of the cube. So to do that, we go to the physics panel. We're going to click on the rigid body physics to enable it. We're going to keep the type as active, keep the mass at 1 kilogram, and we're going to right now keep the shape as a convex hull. The convex hull is described as a kind of a shrink wrap encompassing the mesh. For other objects, we want to change it to something else. And these are the options of things we can have for different collision shapes. This is probably the most computationally. It's a compromise between time and accuracy. Sensitivity is how far away from the mesh before collisions are detected. I'm going to change it to 0.1 meters. It seems to work for me in my test. And that should do it for the physics of one cube. So the next part is we're going to work on the shading of the cube to make it look fun. So we're going to go to the shading layout. And here we have a kind of a lighting setup automatically, and this is the kind of the world that's set up by default. So I was looking at a tutorial by someone, I believe their name is Jeff, using some techniques from their tutorial. I'll put a link in the description. And what we're going to do is we're going to affect, I'm trying to find my cheat sheet. Going to affect the color of the cube by its height, or the Z value. And to do that, we're going to use the principal shader as a basis. For a little bit of flair, we're going to give it some semi-metallic value. Give 0.7, not all the way metallic, but mostly. Turn the roughness down to 0.2. Give it a 0.2 on clear coat. And that should do it for that. No need to keep messing with that. I'm going to drag this over to the left, the middle mouse wheel. And on the far left, we're going to hit Shift A to add a new node. I'm going to start with Input Object Info. Place that here on the far left. Then the next node we're going to need is hit Shift A again, go to Converter, separate X, Y, Z values. Put that right here next to it and put the location into the vector of that node. Hit Shift A again. The next node we're going to need is a converter math node. We're actually going to need 2 of those, so I'm going to hit Shift D to duplicate that node and put it right beside that. Going to feed the Z output to here. Change this to multiply. And I'm going to change this to a value of 0.1. You can experiment with these 2 values at the bottom here to suit your needs of your simulation. Feed the value of 1 to the value here. Leave that as add. And then I'm going to add a color ramp. Shift A, converter, color ramp. Add the value here to the factorial here. And then I'm going to add this color to the base color of the principled shader. It doesn't look like much now. This looks gray. But now I'm going to change this black value on the left to a value here at the bottom of the color wheel. Try to get a little bit of a red. And change this white value here on the right to something on the kind of on the same bottom of the color wheel, maybe more towards the pink side. Because the idea is that it's going to select values all the way around the edge, go around. To do that, we're going to change it from RGB to HSL. And then change it from near to far. And now we see we have along the spectrum a variety of colors. Now if we were to take this cube and move it up and down, hit GZ, we see, depending on the Z value, it changes colors. Now at where we see that add node at 0.5, that's kind of affecting where the middle ground of the change happens. If we move too far up, it stays red. Move too far down, it'll probably stay pink. So I'm going to change that value to -0.1. Now, if I move more positive values, most of the change happens in a positive Z direction, which is what we want. Hit escape. So now we have affected the shape of the cube, the shape keys, the rigid body values, and also the shading. I believe now it's time to duplicate our cube and create our tower. Normally, if you want to duplicate a bunch of the same object, you would use an array modifier. But the problem is we're using shape keys, so when you try to apply an array modifier, which is what we would need to do to make them separate, applying modifiers don't work well with shape keys. So we're going to just duplicate the old-fashioned way. To do so, going to hit Shift D, hit X to lock in along the X axis, and hit 2. Actually, we missed a step, so I'm going to hit X to interesting how it is snapped back to its default position. Let's select the default cube. Let's go back to our shape keys. Go back to the modeling. Hit 7 to go into the top view. Hit 5 to go into orthographic view. And if we go to, actually just get out of edit mode, hit tab to get out of edit mode. We see when it's a cube, it kind of fits perfectly within these lines. But we turn it up to a sphere, it goes beyond those. So for sanity's sake, I want to shrink that sphere. So with the sphere being selected in the shape keys and going to edit mode, I'm going to hit S for scale, 0.7, enter. Now go hit 7 again to go in top view. We see it fits within the same bases as this cube. Alright, now let's see if we can duplicate it. Hit Shift D, X, 2. Now they're side by side. Go back to the layout model. Now we see, we go on the timeline, they both turn to spheres. If we hadn't shrunk the sphere shape, they would have been colliding into each other and they might have separated as well during our animation. So I'm going to hit Shift D, X, 2 again. Now we have our third cube. Now to, that was weird. GX 2. For some reason my pan isn't working as well. Now Shift X2. Shift X2. Now we need to go 5 rows over in a Y direction. So I'm going to hit B for box select and drag it over all 5 box cubes. I'm going to hit Shift D or Y. Shift Y to lock into the Y direction. Hit 2. Then I'm going to hit Shift R to duplicate that action, and that gives me another row each time I do it, without having to do that manually each time. It just repeats the same action. Now I'm going to use the same technique going upward. I'll hit B for box select, drag it over all the cubes, hit Shift D, Z, 2, enter, hit Shift R 3 times to get 5 up. Now we have 125 cubes, or 5 cube, going all sorts of directions and colors. Now if we go to shading, we see based on the Z location, there's a different color. And as these fall down, they should all turn back toward this reddish orange color. Go back to layout mode, hit Alt A to deselect all of this, and I think we are done with the cubes for right now. So let's go ahead and hide those for our next part. So I'm going to hit the I in the outliner for cube collection, and that hides all those within that collection. Now I'm going to select the Wrecking Ball collection for my next part and hit Shift S, cursor to world origin. I'm going to hit 1 for front view and 5 for orthographic view. The next part is going to be creating the chains. So I'm going to hit Shift A, Mesh, Torus. For the Add Torus, I'm going to go ahead and use the context menu on the bottom left. First thing I'm going to do is use the rotation on the x-axis and put 90. That should work for right now. I'm also going to lower the geometry of this by lowering the number of segments from 48 to 24. Now, I'm also going to edit this and lengthen the top half of this to make it look more like a chain link. So I'm going to the modeling layout, and now I'm going to hit Alt A to deselect all vertices. And I'm going to click this button right here, is to show the whole scene as transparent. And while you still see kind of a solid shading view, if you select anything, like using box select, it will select all vertices behind what you see. So I'm going to hit B for box select, and I'm going to select all the vertices right above the x-axis. And we rotate around using the middle mouse button. We see all those vertices, even behind what was in front of me, have been selected. So hit 1 again to go back to front view. Hit GZ. I'm going to hit enter a value of about 1.2. Enter. Now I want a little bit more geometry on the sides here, so I'm going to insert loop cuts. I'm going to hit my mouse over here. I'm going to hit Control R, enter the number 4 for 4 loop cuts, and then hit enter. Now this gives me a chance to slide those along these edges, but I don't want to, so I'm just going to hit enter or escape. I'm going to hit enter. Now I'm going to do the same thing here, hit Control R, I could also use the middle mouse wheel to increase the number instead of typing it in. And left click. Then left click again to set them into place. So this is my first chain link. I'm going to hit the layout tab. First thing I want to do is to make it look a little bit better. Go to object mode or object menu. Hit shade smooth. Now we don't need to do any shape keys. We do need to do physics, so go to the physics tab and hit rigid body. Also active. Keep these at 1 kilogram for right now. We may need to play with this depending on how things turn out. But we need to change this from convex hull to mesh. Right now, think of the collision bounding box as something that's saran wrapped around this chain, including the hole. So when we have chains interlinked to each other, that's kind of going to mess with the convex hull shrink wrap around this mesh. And that's going to cause our chain to explode when we try to animate it. So I'm going to select mesh, and now that shrink wrap is actually carefully wrapped around the actual part of the chain link. Going to leave the margin at 0.04 for this. Now we want to do is do a little bit of shading for this chain link. Go to shading tab, hit 1. I'm going to zoom in here. I'm going to give a little metallic shader that I was messing with. Nothing real fancy. I'm going to hit new from new material, call it metal. In the principled shader, we're going to give it a metallic value of 1, a roughness of 0.1. You see it kind of matches this example here. And this number down here, or value, IOR, is the index of refraction. Now you can go online and look up index of refraction or IORs for different materials. For some reason I just feel compelled to use the number 1.67. Not sure why, but we'll just go for that for right now. Doesn't really matter. Let's shift over here to the left and give ourselves some space. We're going to need to look up my metallic. Add in a texture coordinate input node by hitting Shift A. Input texture coordinate. Actually, we want to do it in the opposite direction. That's why we enabled a node Wrangler. So we hit X to delete that. We'll hit Shift A, texture, noise texture. Put that right about here. I'm going to give the values of 1 for the scale, 20 for detail, and 1 for distortion. And then I'm going to hit Control T, and that will, with the node Wrangler enabled, that will give us the texture coordinate and mapping nodes added right onto the texture node. Next we need a color ramp, so we go to Shift A, Converter, Color Ramp, put that right here, feed the color to the factorial input. I'm going to take the black slider on the left, move it right about to the middle, and then take the white slider on the right and move it about halfway in between, about right here. And then I'm going to take input a vector bump node. Going to do connect the color here to the height of the bump node and take the normal, zoom out a little bit, take the normal from the bump and put in a normal of the principal shader. That gives us a little kind of rougher metallic material, but not everywhere, but just in places. Make it a little bit more interesting. Alright, for our chain link we have the geometry the way we want it. Go back to layout mode. I'll lay it the basic layout, and we have the physics set up, and now we need to duplicate it. So with our link selected, we're going to hit Shift D and hit Z. And notice the origin of our link is kind of in the middle of what the torus was when it was more perfectly circular. So, but that's fine. We'll leave the origin where it is because that'll kind of help us when we make these duplicates. So we want the origin to sit right above the prior link. Now we're going to hit R for rotate along the Z axis, Z, and hit 90. Enter. So now they are intersecting. There's a little bit of slack in here, and that's going to play a factor when we do our animation because everything's going to fall down. Select both of these by holding Shift and then select. Hit Shift D to duplicate both of them. Hit Z to lock in the Z axis. Put it right there so that origin hits the top of the old ones. Let's do that. Same process. B for box select. Select all of them. Shift D. Z to log in the Z axis. All right there. And let's do it one more time. Box select. Select all those. Hit Shift D. Z for Z axis, and about there. So now we have our chain. Now we want to make our wrecking ball. All we're going to do with our origin in the middle still, we're going to hit Shift A, Mesh, UV Sphere. I believe we'll leave all this as a default, except for the Z location. Let's put the Z at a -5. Enter. Now it's down here. We're going to scale it by 5. Enter. Now this sphere is kind of halfway intersecting with this lower link, and we're actually going to join this sphere to that link. Before we do that, let's go ahead and go to Object and Shade Smooth. Now I'm going to, with this sphere, select it, right click and select the lower link, then hit Control J. That would join them together as one mesh. Let's actually go to the Object panel and name this this particular one Wrecking Ball, so we can identify it easier if we need to go back to it. We should really name all our objects properly for good practice, but for this exercise, this should be good enough. Let's see, let's go ahead and go to the shading layout, make sure, yes, our Wrecking Ball is also took on the properties of that last link, so it took on the shader and also the rigid body properties. So let's go back to layout mode, or the default layout, sorry, and we see it's has the rigid body already enabled. But for this one, we want to go ahead and give it some more mass, so it has more wrecking power. The thing about messing with chains and masses, or mass and chains, is you don't want to mess with it too much so that the chains will break. So if I made it, for example, 100 kilograms, part of the chain will break somewhere else. Maybe not immediately right here, but maybe further up. So I found maybe 50 kilograms, for example, should work. Heavy enough to do some damage, but not too much to break the chain. The last part we need is a bar of some sort. We're going to put it through the top link for it to swing from. So to do that, we're going to add a cylinder. So Shift A, Mesh, Cylinder. Mess with the depth. Let's go ahead and put in a value in of 20. Rotate it on the, I believe, the y-axis for right now by 90. That will work. And the radius, we actually want to shrink that a little bit. Hit 3 for side view. And make the radius, let's put it maybe 0.5. Or maybe 0.75. That should work. Now to raise the location of it, I'm just going to move up here, go up to the last link, and I'm going to drag the mouse over the Z location. Keep going till I see it come up. And we want to about right there. I'm afraid it might be a little bit too big, so maybe make the radius 0.7. There, that should work. My other concern is that since we stretched it out, it might not have enough geometry along the middle, so we'll go into the modeling layout. Let's go to the top here. We're in edit mode, so I'm going to hit Control R to add an edge loop. I'm going to move the middle mouse wheel up until we have a good number of loop cuts. And I think that should be good enough. Maybe one more. So about 11 cuts. Left click to confirm those. I don't want to move them, so left click again, and they are in place. Go back to the default layout. Let's go ahead, go to Object, Shade Smooth, and then go into Shading. Or no, you don't have to do that every time. You can actually just go to the Materials tab and click the drag down and or drop down and hit Metal. But to confirm it, you would have to go to this view. So here's our beautiful wrecking ball and bar. Actually want it to, I'm gonna rotate it 90 degrees because I want it from the front, I want it to come from the left, swing from the left. So I'm hit 1 for front view, B to box select all that, hit R to rotate Z for Z axis, 90, enter, hit GZ to lift everything up. Just trying to guess if the x-axis is the floor and there's a little bit of slack in the chain right now. This probably should be where the if the slack came down, the wrecking ball should come down to about here and come through. Now we started our first cube right here at the origin, so we went this way along the y-axis, so we should move this a little bit to in on the y-axis. So G, Y, and I'd say that should be good enough right now. I may have to adjust later. Hit 7 for top view. GY, maybe move it a little bit more. And that should be good enough for now. Now I'm going to hold shift and hit select on the bar to deselect it. what I want to do is move this wrecking ball up, and move it up this way so that it has some moment, some potential energy when the animation starts and swings down. If I were to do it right now, rotate it, it will rotate from the middle of everything I selected, which is not what we want. We want to rotate it from the bar. So how we do that is we select the bar and then hit Shift S, cursor to selected. So it's going to move the 3D cursor to the origin of the object that we had selected, which was the bar, and in the middle of right where we want it to be. And so now to rotate on the 3D cursor, we go up here and right now click this button and select it as median point, which is why it's selected. Rotate it in the middle of everything we selected. We want to go to 3D cursor, so we'll pivot on the 3D cursor instead. Hit 1 for front view and hit R for rotate. Oops, actually sorry, we got to select our chain again. So let's hit Alt A to make sure we have everything deselected. Then hit D for box select. Come to about here, right below the bar, and select everything. So everything but the bar should be selected. Hit 1 for front view, R to rotate, and it's about 90 degrees or so, like that. That should be fine. So now let's go ahead, and we need a floor for everything to rest on. So let's go ahead and change this pivot point back to median. Also hit Shift S, cursor to world origin. Now hit Shift A, mesh plane. We have a pretty small plane compared to everything else, so we're going to hit S for scale, 40, enter. Now we have a bigger floor. Hit tab for edit mode. Hit W for subdivide. Hit 40, or enter 40 for the number of cuts, or actually that'd be too much. Overkill. Let's do 20. Enter. That should be enough geometry to interact with everything falling on top of it. Hit enter to get out of edit mode. Let's give it a quick material, nothing fancy. Hit new in the material tab. Let's call it floor. For base colors, select maybe a blue material or turquoise, like close to my old video. Let's turn the roughness down to about 0.2. And that's all the attention we're going to give to that right now. The last part we need to worry about is the physics. So we're going to hit the physics tab and then hit rigid body like we did before. Instead of being active, we want it passive. And what that would do, that would just allow gravity from acting on it, so it will stay in place, but everything will fall on top of it and collide with it and just lay on top of it. All the other options should be fine. And actually, let's go check the bar again. We didn't add the physics for the bar. We also want that to be a rigid body and also passive. So the bar will collide with this chain right here, but the bar itself will not move. So that'll be something, kind of a pinning point for the chain for it to hang from. So now I think we've done everything we need to do to set everything up, and we're going to deselect the cube collection, or select it so we can see it. I'm going to hit 7 for top view and just examine. We believe the ball is going to swing down and it should collide with our tower here. Go to shading view, just to look around, make sure everything looks aesthetically pleasing. Go back to layout. Gonna hit Control F to save. I haven't hit save in a while. And now we're gonna go to the Scene tab, which is represented by this drop. And we're gonna go to the Rigid Body World section. This gives us a couple of properties, but all the rigid body physics are kind of controlled here. If we want to make a more accurate simulation, which would take longer to calculate, we could mess with these values here to make it a more accurate simulation, but I don't think we'll need to. But what we can do is open the cache section. So right now, if we were hit play, for every frame it will try to calculate all the physics that need to take place in real time, which will be very slow because it's depending on the power of your machine and because it's doing all its calculations on the fly. If we bake those dynamic physics calculations, it will do that ahead of time and make playback a lot easier. And static, whatever it calculates that time, it's going to do it every time you hit play. So we're going to do that. Hit bake all dynamics. It might take a while, so I'll come back when it's done. You'll see at the bottom there's going to be a progress bar, and it's going to go through all the frames and calculate all the dynamics for every frame. Now that happened really quickly for me. I mean, I know I'm using, for Eevee, I'm using my GPU, which is okay, but that happened a little quickly, so I'm a little concerned that maybe something went wrong. So instead of hitting play, because everything will probably freeze up, I'm just going to click through different points in the timeline and see what happens. So 20, 30 frames in, nothing, chain didn't explode, that's good. You can see our tower starts to, parts tries to come apart, and actually our chain broke. So, yep, it comes all to pieces. So we did have a little bit of wrecking action. And not what we expected though. So what we have to do now is, kind of, maybe we should change our weight of our wrecking ball. Maybe we should make it lighter. So let's try 30 kilograms. And actually I want to change, no, I'm going to leave those alone. I was going to say is we can change these from being a convex hole to a box, since that's essentially what it is. But since it changes to a sphere later on, don't want to take that risk. So go ahead and go back to the Scene tab and free all bakes and bake all dynamics. Okay, so baking is done. Let's go scrub through timeline again. Chain still broke, but I think it broke a little bit further out, and it doesn't have enough power to go through the whole tower, but that's okay. So let's try maybe 15. Maybe we should try making the chains a little bit heavier. So let's try 10 kilograms each. So I changed this one chain, and I want to affect all the other chains. So what I can do, with that chain selected, I'm going to hit box select and select all the other chains in the link, or all the links in the chain. I'm going to Hit F3 to search, and I already had this in here from a prior attempt. Type in copy rigid body settings and click on this, and now we'll copy whatever rigid body settings on that first link to all of these. So we click on each one and we see that each one is now 10 kilograms. And I'm going to keep messing with this until I get values that work and get back to you. So here we are with another attempt, and we're going to click through and see. So the chain held together. It kind of just nipped the top of the tower, which is fine. We actually may lower the whole system, and I'll try that again. Now another way to help solve the problems we had, we could also up these values, which would take longer to calculate but give a better simulation. But what I want to worry about right now is have these cubes turn to spheres at the right time. So in reality, the chain isn't going to reach, break this plane until about 80 frames in. So I want to move the keyframes for the change over. So to do that, we go to the animation layout, and we're going to select our cubes. So I'm going to hit Control Alt A to deselect everything. Go to the cubes collection, right click on the collection and select objects, which selects all the objects in that collection. And now you see all the objects are selected, their keyframes also show up. So I want to basically move all the keyframes over 10 frames. I'm going to hit G. I'm going to just move the mouse over till that lines up at frame 80. Hit Alt A to deselect. Going back to our layout. So we go back to frame 80. This is when impact happens roundabout, and then they start turning into spheres. So one last try. Let's go ahead and move this entire system down just a bit. Hit GZ to about there. Free all bakes. Bake all dynamics. So here we are. Let's see what happened. Chain stays together. We have wrecking action. Spheres hit the ground, they roll off the floor, and we've accomplished our mission. Let's go to the shading layout and take a look. Actually, we need a timeline, so we can just hit this, go to the spine timeline. So we started out here, we see these had different colors based on their position on the Z axis, and as they get closer to the ground, they turn to that orange color, red orange color we talked about. So kind of neat. So that's it today. We've learned about rigid body physics, how to make a new shader, and different things in the layout of Blender 2.8. I hope you found this helpful and fun. Leave a comment, and be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Thank you and have a blessed day.